Hey everyone, Sloan here. We just recorded a fabulous conversation with Bill Burckart and Megan Kashner of Colorful Capital. They're both little professors of impact investing. He at Columbia University, she at Northwestern University, Kellogg, who've come together to kind of create a venture fund focused on the LGBT community. Um, really interesting to hear them talk about, both why that fund is necessary, how they've gone about trying to access the people that they're trying to reach, and and then to me and Ashby, what that creates in terms of an authentic economic organism that can be a source of returns going forward. So I think that you'll really enjoy this conversation with them. In addition to that, we have our usual helping of banter, which is like, I feel, what you're really here for. Let's be honest. We talk about some new sovereign wealth funds at the top. We talk about guns. What else do we do? We got garden tips. Winter is coming. We roast Burning Man. I really feel like there's no shortage of great stuff in this conversation. But I think if you are an LGBT entrepreneur or an LGBTQ affiliated or thinking person, it will be particularly valuable because there will be anecdata within it about the challenges that some of us face. That is not intuitive. I mean, I myself was part of a study that Bill and Megan did a couple of years ago where they talked to a bunch of LGBT entrepreneurs about how their identity affected their capital raising experience. And you know what? During the process of having that conversation, I realized a whole bunch of stuff. So I really encourage everyone to pay attention to that. Um, Getting to the point, um, we love you. Thanks so much for coming here. If you have any questions, pretty please just lob them in, freemoneypod@gmail.com. And of course, do not hesitate. Do not forget to give us a great rating on your podcast platform of choice. That's it for me for now. Take it away, Sharkbait.
Ahoy, Free Money Podcast listeners! I'm Sharkbait Buckley, the Disclosure Pirate, and I'm here to set ye straight about what's going on with this here show. Sloan Ortel works for Invest Vegan LLC, a New York registered investment advisor. Ashby Monk works for Stanford University, Adapar, Future Proof, Long Game, and various startups. All opinions expressed by either Sloan or Ashby are entirely their own, and do nae reflect the opinions of their crew or any company. Clients who invest vegan may maintain positions in securities and strategies discussed in this podcast. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Invest Vegan and its representatives are properly licensed or exempted, and a client agreement has been executed. Arr!
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money,
Dollar.
Oop. Welcome to the Free Money Podcast, the Provo Palo Alto conversation about institutional investing that you desperately crave.
I'm glad you remembered.
That
Provo, Palo Alto.
That new login, that new lead just flies right off the tongue. I mean, although, I hope I'm not in Provo for like years and years and years and years.
I know. I hear you. But, and I'm actually technically not in Palo Alto.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like, the nice thing is that there's so many different letters for your various locations.
Los Gatos.
I mean, I love that you live in a town that's called Cats, California.
Yeah, it's
You know,
cats.
Cats.
And we have big ass cats up in these mountains called mountain lions.
So
And
cool.
the good thing about living here is you learn what to do if there's a mountain lion that you run into on trail. You get big, you get your body big. You don't turn your back on the mountain lion; it'll get you.
Yep. I mean, there are a lot of people around here like will carry sidearms in case of encounters with such stuff. I feel like that's kind of mostly because they wanted to justify carrying a sidearm.
Can I be honest though? That's one of the few reasons to carry a sidearm that I can
Yep.
actually get behind.
Yep. Yeah.
You're like,
I mean,
I bumped into bears a few times, and you're like, yeah, maybe carry a gun, dude.
it's one of those things where it does seem. I mean, there are places where you should be carrying a gun, I guess.
Have you seen this one where the guy is literally being chased down the trail by the mountain lion? and he's backing up because he walked in on the mountain lion and its cubs.
Mhm.
And this mountain lion basically chases him back down the trail for like a mile. And he's like yelling and chucking rocks at it. And you know what did go through my mind? I bet you wish you had a gun.
Yeah. 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 I
Sorry.
mean, this is like, I mean, out here in Utah, I love to go to all the weird like antique malls and thrift stores because like the thrifting environment out here is absolutely goated. It's just like not picked over like Brooklyn's. Anyway,
Yeah.
I saw a concealed carry corset
Oh my goodness.
for $100 recently at this place. It was like, so yeah,
Again,
it's a corset that has room for your 9 millimeter inside of it.
that is
Uh,
pretty legit.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've got various sales goals, and if I want to be really set up for that, I should probably invest in the proper corseture.
Yep. I hear you. People are going to be surprised to hear that neither of us expected to be talking about guns at the top of the show.
Well,
this is how we do it. We just
it's
get
the
into
firmly
it.
yeah the firmly established. Our guest in this episode accused me of professionalism, and I've never been more offended.
Holy cow. That's
in
just
the-
some baloney.
I'm sure they'll join at some weird time and give lie to that. But yeah, you got any news for us?
Before I get to the news, here's what I was planning to, because I've got a tip for people that I think is outstanding. And some people may not make it all the way to the tip part of the show in about an hour when we do garden tips. So I'm going to get a certain tip out of the way because I have to tell you, maybe I am allowed to say who told me this. It was Ben Mang. Screw
shit.
It. He
Yep.
deserves the tip. He was telling me about ESG. And he's like, here's my tip for you, Ashby. I call it energy security.
Yeah.
I call it food security. Even national security. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, tell me more about this investment strategy that is all on top of energy security. Anyway, Ben Meng is on top of it. And so I've been using that over the last week, talking about security. People don't even know you're talking about ESG. They don't know what it...
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So, I actually so I mean, I have some companies that we own shares in. I engage with them. One of my recent messages to one of the companies was like, that happens to be regulated pretty tightly by Congress, is like, hey, you guys can stop using those cursed 3 letters if you want. It's not particularly relevant to me that you proclaim fealty to this like arbitrary standard. It's like really more about outcomes that you're driving, and you do that at your revenue line. So I'm kind of happy. I don't need policies. Or some matrix or whatever. But yeah, like
only if it's the real matrix.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. But
With
yeah,
Neo.
like I feel like framing it as energy security, framing it. I mean, the resilience frame a couple of years ago was also big.
I'm still writing papers on that resilience frame, so that's not gone. I'm just talking about how you talk to these treasurers and right-leaning states. If I was BlackRock, I would be touting my food security and energy security investment strategy, and let that speak for itself.
Although, isn't that just a different kind of misselling than the old one, right? Where the old the
calling me on my shit.
Well, like, yeah, the old kind of misselling was like, hey, we're, gonna 10,000 chickens are not gonna die because of all the money you put in our fund.
True.
And to say like, I mean, there is a benefit to energy security and all this stuff, and thinking about and engaging your companies on it, but it's so like obtuse and, bank
Right, so let me give myself credit here, okay? Because I think the language gets in the way of the discussion.
Absolutely.
And so people hear ES&G and they're like, their eyes glaze over and they just stop wanting to hear you. And so obviously the content needs to be sound. You and I have been crapping on ESG for as long as this podcast has existed. And that's because the content underneath the terminology was always poor.
Sus.
And so if the security language allows me to go in and have a really thoughtful conversation about where we get the data, how we measure the impacts, all that good stuff, fine, great.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
mind it. That's why I call it Stanford long-term investing, because it
I
was a way to.
absolutely. And I think that you are so thoughtful in terms of sneaking into like I feel like, to go at one point in one of these episodes, you were like, look, I don't really care what we call it as long as it gets boardroom attention on innovation. Like we could call it friggin', the I don't know, the it's a choir or something like
Yeah,
that. But like
choir.
ESG gets attention and it winds up being a locus of innovation, and that's a great place to have the conversation. Anywhere they're willing to have a conversation about innovation, you can
Yeah,
drive
exactly.
positive outcomes.
Speaking of innovation, Sloan, boy, do I have some news for you.
I hope it's innovative. It better be innovative.
The Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund's new subsidiary, sports subsidiary. They're getting big into the sports investments.
Yep.
Did you hear this, Sloan? Have you heard about them investing in what's called the Professional Fighters League?
Oh my gosh. I did not hear about that.
These are the people that do the Ma. I think it's pronounced. Sorry, I'm being told it's MMA. It's not Ma.
Oh man. Oh my
Yes.
gosh. I mean, you could see that as a growth investment.
I don't know. I was a bit blown away by this one. I kind of think as, the PIF is like adopting Islamic finance principles. I don't know. And I just feel like beating each other's ass for money.
Doesn't the Saudi state have a pretty well documented commitment to violence?
As does America. Come on.
Yeah, that's true. But you're always saying that investors need to realize the true nature of their identity.
Well, I thought it was interesting to see the sports investments carrying on, Sloan. I wasn't going after them for their violence, but I was going to observe that. Isn't it interesting that this sports theme is really taking off right now?
Everywhere all of a sudden.
Yeah.
I think I first heard it in kind of niche zones. I think Ted Seides did a podcast about it like maybe 6 months ago, 7 months ago. And there were a couple of CFA discussions over the years, but all of a sudden it's in headlines, it's in mailers, and it I don't know. I mean, it seems like a strange place to get all hyped up, although I could see
I don't
why.
know what the upside is. It's not going to have venture returns, but I think it's going to have it's like when people were buying trophy assets in New York City. The downside is limited.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a liquidity benefit to having these prestige assets that, an investor like PIF.
You're going to preserve the capital. If you're not going to grow it, you're going to preserve it. And then maybe there's all the extra financial benefits of you get big buff fighters to come to the kingdom and beat each other up.
I mean, there's certainly benefits for staff entertainment,
True.
To this, or, I feel like one of the things I'm always looking at when I'm looking at a company is is the management like an empire builder? Are they trying to kind of, gratify themselves and get a nicer office in a nicer city? If you were an imperious CIO, this would be a great way to pad your nest, is to own a trophy asset of some kind, and even better if you can legitimate it within your portfolio.
True. Next bit of news, got two good ones here. The Japanese Government Pension Investment Fund, Sloan.
This is my new thing. I'm just going to pronounce
it. All right, fine. That's what we're going to call it from now on. The Japuff is huge. It might be the biggest pension on earth.
Mm-hmm.
It might be the second biggest institutional investor on earth behind SAFE in China. It has decided, much to my shock, not awe though, but shock, that they are going to aggressively pursue active management, and they have appointed going from 7 to, I can't find it, 30 managers. I take notes, Sloan. I want you to know I'm doing homework.
That's
here.
A lot. That's a lot of growth. That's
Here's the thing that bubbled in my brain. I love the Japuff. Okay. But it's hard to add value in active management when you're the biggest investor on the planet.
Yep.
And I fear that they're going to start paying active management fees for beta exposure.
Yeah. Although I mean, like in the hero days, like he vocalized really well a philosophy of choosing between managers based on how well they can control externalities.
Yes.
And like I feel like if they're sophisticated in their view of that, and their measurement around that, it might not be that, but yeah, like how big is that portfolio? $1 trillion?
Two.
$2
For
trillion?
sure.
Yeah, so Apple stock trades $10 billion worth of thing a day.
Mhm.
And it's going to
Okay.
be, the largest whatever in,
Yeah.
any market weight portfolio. Anything they do is going to be hugely influential.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
but like I always find that it sucks when they're like, we're committed to regenerative investing, and then I try and reach out and they're like, oh yeah, well you need to be able to cut cash off $500 million check.
Yeah. Okay, last one. There's a new sovereign wealth fund. It's in a place called Borneo.
Oh.
And I want you to know that I think they put the name of this fund into a random sovereign wealth fund name generator. Okay. And so I'm going to read you the name, and then you could confirm or deny if it was randomly generated by machines.
Okay.
It is the Sarawak Sovereign Wealth Future Fund.
Ooh.
What do you think? Random?
What is Sarah? I mean,
I think that's the Borneo part. That's the legit part. It's the Fornivs Sovereign Wealth Future Fund.
I mean, it does seem like they're really pouring it on thick with the the kind of modifiers there.
I think we should all have a Sovereign Wealth Future Fund. The Ashby Sovereign Wealth Future Fund.
Like, are you talking about a retirement account?
Yeah, that's my retirement account. Exactly. That's my 401k. The Ashby Sovereign Wealth Future Fund is actually my SEP.
I mean, I do love the idea of like, just silly. I like having so many of these things operative that it's like asset managers where it's like, color and geologic formation.
It's fun. Yeah, I guess that's where I was going with my news item. It feels like we are getting into like a whole series of naming conventions, like Blue Rock, Blackstone, all of the Treat Oak,
trust story. Yeah, exactly. And then don't get me started on the Latin and the mythology. But
my goodness.
Isn't that like kind of in a way like exactly what the the best outgrowth of insourcing is like the proliferation of asset management decision makers moves from being these like vendors to being institutional asset owners.
Yeah, totally. And so why not get fun names? You may as well go for the fun names.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, I mean, maybe the make fun ability that this confers on the sector as a whole,
is good for our podcast.
It's good for certainly great content for us. I mean, which is, I think, in terms of structural value creation, I think that's where everyone should be concerned. But I think maybe it leads to getting more recognition in the mainstream.
It does. And I'll tell you, I found this one because I did have a search term for future fund. And I was like, oh, sovereign wealth future fund. What's that about? And then I read the article. And it was actually a fascinating article because the politician was like, we got to make sure we get good governance in our Borneo sovereign wealth future fund. We have to make sure politicians can't influence investment decisions. And we have to have arm's length governance structures. So even though we're critiquing the name, it does feel like the naming conventions are kind of following investment conventions and governance conventions and all these things that we would hope to see in the new sovereign wealth funds being established.
Yeah, exactly. Versus the legacy, asset management industry. But speaking of new funds being established, we have our first of two guests in the lobby. Should I let her in, do you think? I mean,
let's just get if only one person showed up, we'll get them
they're
talking.
both here. Oh my gosh.
It's how.
No way. Fancy seeing you guys here. It's
Hello,
crazy that you just
hello.
like happen to be like in this.
We were in the neighborhood.
Yeah, like thanks for dropping by. Our guests, of course, are Megan Kashner and Bill Burckart. She of the Northwestern School of Management. He of where the hell? What's your other gig, Bill? Like,
We do it all live here, Bill. I just want
yeah,
you
yeah,
to know.
yeah.
Yes. Also, adjunct professor at Columbia, SIPA.
Oh, no big deal.
Oh,
Look at this
MVP.
guy.
You know.
Legit.
But TIIP, or the Investment Integration.
The Investment Integration Project. That is the phrasing that I was looking for. But you guys are the force behind Colorful Capital, which is an LGBT oriented venture fund. Like, why would anybody want to invest in queers? I think I basically go out of my way to demonstrate that we're unprofessional and uninvestable every single day.
Not true.
I think the bigger question, truthfully, is why do people shy away from investing in queers, right? Why is the market tipped, biased, structurally barred in some way from an equal amount of money flowing towards LGBTQ plus founders as to those who are not? So I think it's more of a question of structural inequity. But to keep on the light note, we're fabulous. Why would people not want to invest in us?
But yeah, like it's such an interesting story, and I'm far from impartial. I'm an advisor to this fund, and I consider these people. I mean, this is the Related Parties podcast. What
I was gonna say that's half of what we do here is
yeah.
related
But
to
like
what we do.
when you're telling people about this story, right? There's not one LGBT experience. I mean, we represent 3 of the 4 letters here. And like our experiences day to day are completely different. I'm sure. How does that play into the storytelling? Does that make what you're doing harder in some kind of way?
I mean, so I'm thinking about it from 2 levels. So I think one is why. So why is more capital not flowing towards ventures led by our community, right? Broadly defined. And I think that I'm a systems thinker, so I try to take it back to like what's the underlying belief that is ultimately cascading through. And I was really thinking about this one. I was talking about it with some colleagues, and I think it's just this: it's a fundamental belief that a monoculture is the most efficient way to allocate assets, right? And the reality of that, and that because we did this big report on racial inequity, and you can't, like, the assumption can't just be that like everybody's racist, right? Like that can't be the fundamental starting point. It's a huge part of it, and it permeates through the foundations of our financial system, but it's one aspect, right? And so when I was grappling with this whole idea of, well, what's that underlying, it's that belief that, yeah, yet again, there's a efficient way to do this, and it's predominantly straight white men that are going to be the most efficient at that. In reality, how it plays out then for the members of the community that we're focusing on is, yeah, it's uneven, and the experience is more severe for certain members of the community, particularly when intersectionality is mixed into it. And Megan and I and so we've talked about this, but it's some of the horror stories that we've heard from different members, and a lot of it's because, yet again, the venture capital world is traditionally run by white men, maybe members of the community, largely not. And so that's where the money goes, to those that they see and understand. And it's because of the networks they're part of. I don't know if Megan would add.
Well, and I think, Sloan, just to piggyback on the way that you framed this, of course, when you've met one founder, you've met one founder. But when you've met one member of the LGBTQ plus community, you've met one member of the LGBTQ plus community. We seem to have moved past the era in the 90s when there were total of 5 lesbian haircuts to be found out there, and we could count them.
We're up to 20 now.
But what's woven in here when we look at the barriers? We're looking at homophobia, we're looking at misogyny, we're looking at transphobia, we're looking at a different flavor of misogyny and homophobia, which is more of like an over hypersexualization lens that people put on members of our community. We've got layers of racism, ableism, you name it, it's playing in.
That's so yeah, I mean, like that's I you know, and I'm really excited to press for some specific stories that, you can tell on an anonymous basis. But I'll just say that when y'all and one of your MBA students, Megan, interviewed me around my own experiences, I was like, holy shit, that's transphobia? Huh. I like, and I think there's this sort of problem where, those of us who are doing the doing of, starting businesses, like, are often too in the weeds of whatever we're actually doing day to day to like attribute, various like causal factors to our experiences. But I think, like, it might be helpful and healing for some people to just hear some of this stuff that you've heard, other LGBT founders go through, so that they can kind of think about, if that's happening to them, maybe it's not, just about them. Maybe it's something systemic.
Yeah. And
Well,
I go ahead, Megan.
Sometimes it is blatant, right? When a gender lens fund is talking to a trans woman and looks that woman dead in the face and says, "Yeah, but are you a real woman?" Right? That's blatant. That's overt. That's right. There is nothing subtle about that. And that legit has happened to a founder that we know. Um, and so much more of it, right, is not that overt, right? So Bill, go ahead. I just wanted to like lead with that one because sometimes it's not overt and we internalize negative messages, or there's something wrong with my venture, there's something wrong with me, why can't I access capital the way that others can, because it's not overt and we can't see it, but sometimes we can.
That
Yeah,
makes total
and
sense.
I think it's an interesting thing because it how it plays out for different segments of the community, it goes back to that idea that the moment that there's multiple dimensions to an identity, um, that's when you start to see the most severe representations of this kind of, put any of the isms next to it, right? Like that are informing that. And so we've got like a laundry list of these things, and they're all shades of basically people being horrible, right? Like I mean, that's the reality. And what the problem with that though is that because of the way that someone's hair is, or their clothes, or their gender or sexual identification, all of those things don't speak anything about the quality of the leader and the ability to really build powerful enterprises that not only are potentially good for the world, but also can really drive competitive returns. It has nothing to do with it. And so when you see, I mean, we've been in these different meetings where it's like you see a founder come in and they're not, you can tell at the beginning of the call, they're not sure how they can show up. And then by the end of it, you'll get that, thank you so much for just creating a safe space. And then they'll recommend other founders to talk to us. That's the thing. That's that. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if you'd say it differently, Megan, but that's what sticks with me.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And the internalization, Sloan, that you were mentioning is real. I cannot tell you, there have been more than a handful of conversations with founders where they have expressed that, like, I've seen other founders raising money based on like a worse
Oh,
idea
It's
you know,
a,
on the back of a
this is one of those,
napkin.
she wants to leave you really wanting that. Right,
I know. It was
This is
good. We lost you for a second, Megan.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
For the
yeah,
punch, the punchline.
yeah, right as you were saying expressed. Yeah, this is what you get for accusing us of professionalism,
Yeah, no.
Bill.
Okay,
I mean, I know
I'm
better. I know better.
Finish your thought.
I'm shutting down some other things that are taking up bandwidth here. I'm not sure why I'm freezing. There we
All
go.
right, while you do that, let me just offer a reflection and another question while you're tabifying your device. First thing to say is I run a lot of programs around institutional investment and good governance, and we build a lot of process into organizations to strip out cognitive biases, anchoring bias, status quo bias. We write memos, we challenge them in investment committees, we do all these things. We don't have good tools for behavioral biases and emotional biases. And I've done a lot of work at Stanford on racial bias, and we don't do a good job of stripping that out. And so hearing you talk about these biases affecting the flow of capital, it seems obvious to me that you could go and build a highly successful venture capital firm because the markets aren't functioning efficiently, because these biases exist. Then you can go and capitalize on it by building an amazing community, and you can be the ones to kind of take advantage. That's a terrible way of describing what you do when there's a bias, but that's what investors do. They spot biases in markets and they take advantage of them. You're taking advantage of this bias to drive out performance. And so I think there is a lovely story here around what you're doing, even from a basic old school pension mindset about outperformance. The second thing I would say, which is now the question I was going to ask instead of just talking, is about building your networks. But Bill, you just kind of talked about it. I was going to actually ask about how hard is it to build a network when, in my experience, this community is spread across every industry and every part of the world. So building a dedicated network where you can source these deals, manage these deals, I thought might be hard. But you said it, Bill. You said word of mouth. You said you're creating safe spaces. And that is actually a lot of how venture capital builds their network. So just tell me a little bit more about how you build your network, and if it is word of mouth, if you're more proactive, and how you originate deals.
Yeah, so we do it in a couple of ways. We were really intentional in when we were setting this up to be mindful of the fact that we wanted to bring people in that represented different facets of the financial services community, unified by this idea that they are members of the LGBTQ plus community. Although we do have our token straight person, but the idea is that you were drawing from different perspectives, and so that's why you have folks. I mean, so the reason that Sloan and Megan and I know Sloan is through one of our other advisory group members, Bob Danhauser, who was at CFA, now he's at Shift, and so you're trying to get people that kind of cut at this from different angles, right? Because they represent different reach within the community to figure out like more opportunities. We have incredible venture partners that are also similarly helping to source and ultimately vet a lot of opportunities. And then it's really leaning into beyond word of mouth, beyond making sure that the experience of the founders is positive, really connecting with we're not the only ones, right? There's a community. Start Out has been incredible as a kind of resource and just a source of opportunities, insights. I mean, they've been really helpful for us. And so Start Out is a huge thing, and they vet deals, and that's a great spot for a lot of leaders to go to when they're starting to raise capital. It's unfortunate that there's not a lot of other purely dedicated investment strategies that are out there focused on the community. There's a lot of lip service that's played, but we would be remiss if we didn't point out like Chasing Rainbows, Pride Fund. I mean, there's a couple of them, but yet again, like we can name on one hand how many there are, and that's really frustrating.
And
it's
you
really,
got to two.
and I got to two. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
like,
promise you, I can't count that high, but I can count more than two.
yeah.
Yeah, and despite what you may have heard, George Soros does not hand out $5 million checks to every LGBT backed company. At least if that's a thing, I feel like I'm due some money, Georgie
million.
Porgy. I'll be in New York in a couple of weeks. You can hit me up then. Anyway, that's a really sophisticated approach, because a lot of how a venture fund is an organism, right? That is really about access to deal flow, access to information on a recurring basis. And like I love the way that you guys are approaching this, not as like some, oh yeah, the pink dollar has an increasing share of wallet, but more as by occupying this, this crack, you can access, just a bunch of ideation in a preferential way.
Well, and what's interesting is if I wanted to go into Crunchbase or PitchBook or any listing or index of startups and look for female founders, I might be able to sort for that. Look for founders and companies in the Midwest, I might be able to sort for that. You cannot do that for LGBTQ identity, with the exception, a little shout out to Crunchbase, which is now allowing folks to self-identify, which is lovely.
Hmm.
But even when we can identify ourselves, there are reasons, true, valid reasons why we might, as founders, as investors, whomever, we might choose not to check that box. And so one of the other things that we're doing, which is antithetical to how VC generally operates, is folks can reach out directly to us. There's a contact us form on our website, there's a contact email address, and we will look at those because we need folks to self identify and seek us out, which is truly antithetical, right? Most of VC is who sent you, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Who sent you? I'm in Chicago, right? It's all about who sent you, right? Politically, but this is in terms of capital flow. And interestingly, generally, when you have even an event and a VC is open to meeting with some founders, there will be a curatorial process where the VC can let the organizers know what types of folks they're interested in meeting with, and they will sort of say, okay, I'd like to meet with these, and then the founders of the event, whatever, will make it happen. I recently went to one where the the founders of the ventures could reach out directly to me through the portal for this event and say, I am I'm a trans founder, I'm a lesbian woman, I'm a whatever, and I have this venture and I'd love to meet with you. Switching the flow, right, between the capital provider controlling all the access to themselves and allowing ventures and founders to self-identify, is a game changer as well. And I wish that more of these matchmaking events and services would do that.
That's really huge. Yeah, I know a lot of my trans kind of brethren and sibling, I don't in the finance community are flying under the radar because they don't want to be out on their U4s or whatever for whatever reason. So that's a huge point. Um, as two literal professors of impact investing, the one imagines that you are fairly knowledgeable on the subject, but this is the first time you've actually stood up a pooled investment vehicle, stood up a fund. I know that you can know the theory pretty damn well, but when it comes time to actually stand up a regulated vehicle, it's a whole thing. How has that been? What have you learned?
Why don't you start that?
So there are a lot of SEC rules about what one can and cannot say. So what we will talk about is the firm, the Colorful Capital as a firm.
Yeah. Important caveat.
Yes. So standing up Colorful Capital as a firm has been both easier than one might think and harder than one might think, right? So standing up a firm and getting the legal structure and getting the right, back office and, contractor support, everything that you need, vendors, is actually probably easier than it's ever been for starting a new VC fund. The bringing in of interest, the bringing in of collaboration, also fairly easy. For everyone in the VC community writ large right now, capital access is a challenge. When Silicon Valley Bank happened, it really put a damper on the entire environment. We are emerging from that as a system. We are now emerging from that, and I think this fall is going to be a really interesting moment of windfall for a lot of first-time fund managers like us.
Yeah, and I guess I would say, talking about yet again the firm, that it's an interesting thing. So much of my career has been spent advising institutional investors on how to build strategies that are focused on impact investment or sustainable finance generally. And so my work has touched on certain asset classes that I'm not saying we're just a firm. But so,
And what do you do at that firm? Nothing. I know we're just firm stuff. I've got a briefcase
Things
full of
that
jelly
firms do.
beans.
yeah, we've got a great advisory group that you're a part of, so there's that. But no, it's this thing of going from more of the strategic level to getting into the tactical part and really starting to understand the kind of nuance that's needed, particularly with what we're aiming to do and equipping these founders in the right way and supporting them in the right way. That's always like, it's always that question of, are we organized and are we showing up in the way that's going to be most beneficial for the founders? Because selfishly, the better they do, the better we do. And that's been the part that I think I didn't anticipate, the really the different ways that we have to show up. There's a couple of anecdotes there, but yet again, I don't think we can talk about certain things. But there is there's one in particular, like things that, yeah. So I'll just stop there because I don't want to get myself in trouble.
We're gonna stop talking about your firm now. So your firm is out of this picture. So now we're talking about something other than your firm. But let's talk about venture capital, okay?
Which again is completely different from your
Not
firm
your
and
firm.
what
That's
it may do.
correct.
Yeah.
Wildly distinct.
Let's talk about the impact that any investor might have using venture capital, with, say, a strategy based around LGBTQ trans.
Yeah.
But that impact you can have through venture capital in the broader world. Can we just talk about that and like what are the limits of it? But also, what are the benefits of pursuing a venture-based impact strategy?
So I'll start by talking about some of the limitations because I want us to just be realistic. Venture capital is an alternative asset class, right? It has its uses, and for anyone, right, you want to see those uses in the context of a broader portfolio strategy. When you're talking about impact, venture capital has a particular role to play when it comes to access to capital, which means the opportunity to grow and scale for founders and leaders of early to growth stage companies. What does that mean specifically for LGBTQ folks? Well, what do we know? We know that folks in our community are sitting at a structural disadvantage economically and in terms of household income as compared to our straight colleagues and peers out there in the community. We know that intersectionality of identity then layers on top of those structural disadvantages, for a household led by two women, for someone who is LGBTQ and Black, right? So these things layer on one another. So where does VC fit? Well, you can overcome economic structural inequity, or at least you can try and access better economic and financial mobility a few different ways, right? Education is a great way. Owning real estate is a great way. Inheriting money is a very good way, right? If you can do it,
Tried
right?
and true,
Smoke
yeah.
them if you got them, right?
Oldest trick in the book.
But owning a business is also an incredible way towards economic mobility. But if those structural barriers to access to capital stand, then we still have barriers to that opportunity to, for members of our community, given their multiple layers of identity, for them to overcome and thrive. And what happens when members of our community overcome and thrive? Their wealth and economic stability increases. Those who they employ and hire, right, are benefited. The communities they operate in are benefiting, and the places where they spend their money are also benefiting. So, there is a rising tide, concept here.
There's two, I guess, additional dimensions. So totally agree with everything Megan said. I think two additional dimensions that gets into, I think, one of the ways to answer your question. So we often think about the spectrum of capital, and this is me putting the systems hat on, where it's the spectrum of capital, and you think the purpose of different capital in the world is different, right? So it's like, if you want to drive incremental kind of evolutionary change of big companies around transparency and other activities, public equities are great. If you want to help finance public goods, fixed income, right? If you want to drive disruptive, revolutionary change, venture capital and private equity are the way to go. And so it's just that idea of saying where we show up and how we show up is pretty critical to the system that we're trying to ultimately disrupt or otherwise increase the health of. And I think it's doubly important because what we're fundamentally talking about, this is a community that has been habitually overlooked and undervalued. And what that does is it creates gaps in the economy, right? It creates not just downside, but it also creates like missed upside. And so we often talk about this whole idea of like, it's important as an investor, if you're thinking of a systems lens, that you're seeking alpha, but you're also focused as much on building beta, building the health of the economy. So if you have this significant portion of the population that has been yet again overlooked and undervalued, you're not you got to bring them in, because then you really, that's where you get to additionality. That's where you get to changing the adaptability of a system. That's for me, and I think any investor worth their salt that has a long time horizon or anything, they should care about that.
I think that's a really important lens. Is like I remember the first time I heard somebody, it was someone from a Dutch pension, which I'm sure is a shock to zero people in the room. Talk about building beta returns. It was a waterfall moment for me where I was just like, wait a second, you can do that. So thank you for giving that moment to whatever baby systems thinker is out there in the world listening to this. And
I'm sure. Ashby, who here hasn't read John LeComic and Jim Hawley's book?
I was going to say universal ownership. Exactly.
Hi. Where's Jim? We just got to phone him in.
Yeah, no, we can dial him in. He's not.
Yeah, he'll be here at some point. I mean, like people just show up here. It's weird. It's like a Zoom meeting somehow. But
did we actually just enter a Zoom bomb? Is that what happened? Like we weren't actually.
We had no clue you guys were showing up here today.
Yeah. It's totally cool though. Thanks for being so polished and prepared to talk about your fund.
Our firm.
Yeah, not a fund. Yeah, like I never mind. There's no funds here. No one has funds. It's only firms. Anyway, I'm a firm supporter.
The one thing that I would add to what Bill was saying is, when we think about the spectrum of impact capital, and for those listening, watching, consuming this, if you haven't looked at the Bridges fund management spectrum of impact capital, please do. There was a misperception for years, if not decades, that you could not have capital for impact that would yield market rate returns. And a VC approach to impacting a broad community that has been undervalued and has faced structural disadvantage in terms of access to capital, it's one of those opportunities to prove that, that misbelief wrong, that you really can drive market rate returns through impact investing.
Yeah,
and beyond.
And beyond, yeah, because contrary to popular belief, we actually do talk okay and do business okay, despite doing different things in the bedroom.
Yowzer.
Yeah, I mean, the very nature of our bedroom activities, you might say, is innovative. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Give them some credit. Some non-LGBTQ folks have creativity in that area.
Yeah, that's appropriation, Megan.
Wait, also, just out of curiosity, so people will be able to actually see us?
No.
No. I mean, maybe.
At some point.
Did you see when I missed my mouth with the cup of water and I spilt it all over myself?
Oh, no.
Well, now this has to be the first one we put up on YouTube.
Oh, my gosh.
I thought you saw me. I was like, oh.
Okay, none of us noticed that.
No, I missed it.
Glad I brought it up. Yeah.
Imposter syndrome much? Anyway, I'm kicking you guys out of here.
Thank you so much. It's awesome to have you.
Bye.
There is so much evidence now that impact investment strategies drive beyond market performance. It's the development funds, it's the impact lens. It's like you can almost feel their privileged access to deal flow, right? Like
exactly. Like
people are going to invite them into deals just to have them involved.
I know people who are crazy innovative that probably would not talk to most of the VC folks that I know, but would talk to Megan and Bill, and their partners. And like it's not like that crazy. I feel like an impact firm or with VC firms in general, you always want to look at it as a social organism and say, how does this operate?
Yeah.
And you can really get an intuitive sense of how backing LGBT founders could be something that would be kind of a flywheel effect over time.
Yeah.
And like I kind of love being like, on the advisory calls, I'm always like, hey, what's up, fellow members of the gay mafia?
Yeah. Why not? Better than
Yeah.
PayPal Mafia.
Yeah, exactly. Much better than PayPal. And like the free money cabal is not quite as organized as the gay mafia,
Look, we
but
can't talk about F&On though. If we could, people
yeah, we
would
can't talk about
understand.
it. Yeah. I mean, it's just a shame that we can't talk in detail about all the rad shit that's happening
I
within
know.
F&On. I mean,
F&On is so much. We're having a lot of influence in Washington. Sorry, I'm
yeah.
not supposed to talk about it. But,
Yeah. Like big things are happening.
Big
Where we go
things.
one, we go all. That's a QAnon reference if you didn't get it.
Oh, shoot. Hey, one of the things that I cracked up at, which I couldn't really talk about, was when Megan was saying about, if you just have to you just have to inherit a bunch of money.
Oh, totally true. It's funny.
I was always like made this joke, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's like a philanthropist. It's
yeah,
like,
I mean, like sign me up. I feel like I would be great at being an eccentric heir.
me too.
Right?
Oh
like
my God, I will wear bow ties.
I
You know what I
feel
mean?
like what you need is the really nice silk robe, like the with
that you wear at inappropriate places, like cocktail parties.
Exactly. And I think though too, it's like it's hard to really intuit and internalize how much of entrepreneurial activity is related to that inherited wealth thing. Like
Yeah.
I was talking about this with someone on the Woodcash team recently, where like we were chatting about somebody that is a little eccentric who is in some of the networking circles that we come across, and it's like, how the heck is this person funding their existence? And then we were just sort of like, people inherit wealth, don't they?
It happens.
It's one of those, you can know it, you can internalize it, you can realize it, but it cannot really hit you. Anyway, what's been hard for you recently, Ashbones?
Wow. It's all hard. Feels like beginning of the school year. Kids although you know what? Both my kids go to the same school this year.
Oh,
that's
good.
awesome. So that is not hard things. That's the opposite of hard things. That means one drop-off location.
Synergy.
Goodbye. They're both out the door. You know what I mean?
That's fabulous.
Also, as much as I think Elon Musk is a tool, his car makes a very loud fart noise when you put it in park.
Seriously?
You can put your Tesla in park. You can put up this amazing entertainment dashboard, and underneath the car, through the thing that does the honk, is a giant megaphone. That megaphone has a fart option. You can make a fart so loud you could hear it from 150 yards away. And so what I get to do is pull into my kid's parking lot and just rock the biggest fart and
let one fucking
have my
rip.
kids be like, oh my God, that's Dad. I've got to go get in that car that's making that fart noise. Everybody's like looking around. Anyway, none of this stuff is hard, but it's interesting, I think.
It's the spice of life, you might say.
What's hard for you?
Right now so we're gearing up to hard launch Woodcash, right? So, I'm going by Amtrak in a couple of weeks, because like, okay, it feels kind of fucked up to fly to sell carbon removal to people.
It does. I get
it. And so I'm taking the Amtrak to New York City for Climate Week.
Can you document that? Do you know that my son and I, Henry and I, and B will be mad that I didn't mention her. The three of us, Courtney's not interested in this at all, but me and my kids, we want to do a long train trip, an overnight train trip.
I feel like, it's sort of this like undiscovered country, like when I was working at CFA on the East Coast, your options for getting to Charlottesville, Virginia from New York City were either to take a flight that is always canceled or always delayed, or to take the Amtrak, which is like hyper reliable, but 9 hours. And, I feel like if I can get good at taking Amtrak, that's just like a huge, dividend for the rest of my life.
There's
but yeah,
something to be said for like staring out a train window and having deep thoughts while you're like potentially writing on a laptop.
exactly.
Or
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm hoping is to
yeah.
have like, I got to do some outreach. I'm going to stop along the way in various places and try and do some outreach. If you know anybody who wants to buy carbon removal credits, guys, reach out. But the like, but
Shark bait's gonna
basically,
kick your ass for selling stuff.
shark bait. I mean,
Just messing
that's a
with you.
good
That's
point.
fine.
Yeah, he's
That's
gonna
fine.
feed. I mean, well,
Gonna make you walk the plank.
the mysterious other shark bait, like shark bait 1 will come back from the dead.
One day we'll have Shark Bait 1 fight Shark Bait 2.
Holy shit, that would be amazing.
Be
But
the
yeah,
final,
anyway,
the final episode.
my heart exactly. Dun, 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 dun. But yeah, figuring out how to actually manage the sales stuff is hard. We're at the point where we need like a CRM and we gotta like pick one and
Yeah.
all that shit.
They're out there.
Um,
CRM.
yeah. I've been told there are SaaS innovations out there, but
Yep.
I think what people are really that's the preview again. What people are really excited about, what everyone's really here for,
No.
is the Dear Ashby horn, which is playing, loading.
Is it playing? I don't hear it.
There we go. That was it.
Oh.
We the best at sound effects. But yeah, just for anyone listening, in addition to giving us 5-star reviews on your podcast platform of choice, also know that we love taking your questions. You can write an email to freemoneypod@gmail.com, and these questions can be really thought out, like graduate student questions where you're like, Dr. Monk, I read your paper on identity investing, and
Oh, I love that.
or you can do questions like the one that this one asked, which I think is really quite topical.
Yeah.
When did Burning Man become a punchline instead of a cool gathering for fun people?
It might be this year, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, I never went, but then again, I've never been into hard drugs. So like, the concept of like going out to the desert and just tripping out was never like for me. I know everybody tells me, oh no, you don't even need to be on drugs to be there. And then you read about it and you're like, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
I mean, I feel like going to Burning Man and not at least doing a little bit of mushrooms, is a it's like it's like not going to the gift shop.
Yeah. So and I think the opportunities I've had to do Burning Man, it was just I have little kids. It's like it just never fit. But this year, in particular, with the rain and the nastiness, I think like people saw, the sheltering in place at Burning Man. This was the first time. So this is what people are saying. Nobody wants to go to the desert for Burning Man and be told to shelter in place, which happened this year.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it was when Ray Dalio got photographed at Burning Man in that ridiculous outfit that I like. So I've had plenty of opportunities to go to Burning Man over the years.
Didn't you expect to see Jeff Bezos with his fiancée?
Yeah, exactly. Like it would be. I mean, that's the problem. It's like they're
showing up everywhere.
Like for instance, I actually know the guy who runs the Orgy Dome kind of decently well.
Oh, that was in the news.
Yeah. The Orgy Dome is a big deal, and like if you're a sex positive person, it's not that big a world, and like but like it's usually not hanging out with people like that is like what's famous about Burning Man. It's like the lawyer who went to the Supreme Court and got it fixed so that Nestle can use child slaves to harvest cocoa without violating its promises or whatever, is at Burning Man.
The one that I think the reason, have you heard of the Bohemian Grove?
I think I have. Yeah, it's like that's like a California.
That's that's like the next level of cool. I think
the California version of Skull and Bones, I feel.
Yeah, you got into like the redwoods and I think you're doing drugs there too. I don't know. I've never been, but that's where you're getting Supreme Court justices and senators and titans of industry mixing with artists, and so it's kind of a mini version of that. You could probably talk me into going to that one.
Same. I think like what the people that I know who are like and my old address is like in the burner mythology is like a semi-sacred spot or a sanctified spot,
Oh.
like a loft building in Brooklyn.
Hmm.
I'm a caricature of myself. But what all those people would say is like, all right, I'm over the big burn, but the regional burns are where it's really at.
Oh.
So if you go to one of the, like, there's usually local meetups or local groups that are a little bit less bad.
It's
But
like the
yeah,
difference between Woodstock and Lollapalooza.
yeah. Exactly.
Not really, but
Here's another
anyway.
great here's another great one.
Hit me.
How the heck should I dress in today's industry? Do clients expect me to be wearing a collared shirt, or will my commitment to their success speak for itself?
I'm tempted to say, like, put a goddamn suit on and just go full rad, old school. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I did it. When I wore
yeah.
a suit and tie for a long time. Well, but by that I mean like 9 months. But why not try it out once in your life? Putting the suit on. It's like you're going to
There
war in
is
the
something
morning.
to that. I mean, like I feel like I have been observably more productive on days where I've put on, like, because I work from home like everyone does these days, right? Like,
Yeah,
and my commute is basically down the stairs, except I don't go all the way to the bathroom.
yeah.
So like, but I've found when I take the time to be in actual clothes when I leave my bed, I'm just happier. And like, I feel like it doesn't necessarily have to be a suit, but having some kind of getup that screams professionalism and interaction is a worthwhile thing.
Yeah, there was this like super wunder kid recently that I met, and I've done a bunch of work with, and he would show up to Zoom meetings in a suit, and I couldn't help but make fun of him. So, um, I love the kid, but it's like at a certain point you're overdoing it. So I would concur with your take, Sloan, which is like just look sharp, like put on a collared shirt, put on a nice,
Yeah.
put on a nice sweater. Um, comb your hair,
Be
whatever it is.
vibesy.
Yeah, like take it seriously. Be professional. This business, at least today, is all about your network. And
So true.
so, take a little bit of pride, put on your deodorant, um, things like that. But I do feel, even to this day, when I throw on the suit and the nice shoes and the leather
Yep.
belt and I'm doing the tie up, it's kind of like putting on the sports outfit. You're like, it's go time. Like I'm going to do something.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
do miss that a little bit sitting here in my onesie. No, I know you can't see me, but I just have my
Yeah.
snuggie on here.
Yeah, Ashby's wearing basically the bottom of his fursuit, and you can see
Exactly.
the back of his head is visible on the couch behind him. Uh, I didn't know you identified as a fox, Ashby. That's so interesting. I support you. This is a safe space.
Thank you.
All right. This is actually like I think a really interesting question.
Good.
Around. I mean, so many different levels. Let's just ask it. So we now know that aliens are real, thanks to all
Yes,
the
we do.
hearings, or at least UAPs, right? Unexplained aerial phenomena are
Mhm.
real. Let's assume that aliens have been walking among us in the finance industry for decades. What subspecialty do you think they would most likely gravitate towards?
And those of us that have been in finance for decades know this is true. Like they're in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely people who you talk to. I mean, I usually assume it's more like linked to, like the CIA or something like that, because there are firms out there that are like explicitly linked to the CIA or to the FSB or to whatever
Whatever it
state
is.
entity, out there.
So I interpreted this with three different subcategories. Do the aliens mean us harm? Do the aliens want to help us? Do the aliens just want to hide and observe? Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Do they mean to harm us? I think they're working in crypto. To me, the amount of energy, the amount of bullshit, the amount of fraud
That would explain so much.
Holy cow. Like
Yeah.
we were generating more energy than nation states to make this bullshit ecosystem function so that
That
we
would
could
yeah.
look at fake ape NFTs and think they were valuable. It's like these aliens got us. They're taking us down from within. Okay.
Yep.
That's the first one. Second one is if they want to help us because they're coming in and they're like, well, it's like the Star Trek philosophy where you can't reveal yourself to the primitive species. Remember that one?
Yeah, the Prime Directive.
Holy shit, you know the Prime Directive?
Girl,
Fuck.
come on.
Dude, yeah, I'm literally talking about the Prime Directive.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
Come on.
All right, come on. Sorry.
Yeah.
Venture capital. I think that's it. I think it's the Prime Directive. I think they're in there.
You think venture capital is a prime directive? You know, Ashby, like that's a like
the good
little...
ones are aliens. The rest of them are all humans.
That's like, a little. It's like to become a caricature of yourself. Like,
sorry,
yeah. like I'm being like,
I see the positive. I'm optimistic about the potential. I just got off a session with a firm called Color Capital.
Yeah, that's true. They're out here. They're fulfilling the Prime Directive.
They could be aliens.
They could be aliens. That would explain a fair bit.
And then the observe and report hedge funds.
Yeah, all the secrecy.
Boxes. They're sitting back there, high frequency trading. They are collecting all the metadata.
Yep.
Doing some trading, and they're sending back the insights to the mothership on the other side of Jupiter.
Yep. I would add into that private credit because I feel like I feel like right now
observe and report one.
Yeah. Like I feel like right now you can basically do anything and call it private credit.
Isn't that right? Holy shit! We're all private credit managers, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
If you have a credit card, you're a private credit manager.
Exactly. I'm a private credit, allocator when I choose between my Amex card and my whatever.
Yeah, I look at my wallet and I'm like, which one do I want? And then people look at me and they say, why do you carry such a big freaking wallet? It's like I'm a private credit manager, you mofo.
Because of all the innovation, asshole.
I'm like George Costanza. I've got this big ass wallet. Everybody makes fun of me for it.
I mean, that's very old school.
Fuck you, I'm a private credit manager.
I love that. I mean, yeah, when we eventually get the merch store back up, I feel like we need like a bumper sticker or a magnet that says that.
Yes.
There was a sell side.
The merch store was so good, Sloan. We had t-shirts. We had underwear.
Yep.
We might have had a hat.
We had hats. We
had
hats.
a mug.
Yep.
I still drink from my mug.
Yeah, I mean, I broke my mug, unfortunately, because, I was putting it through trials just to make sure, because our quality standards are obviously...
No, we got high standards, yes.
Yeah, you got to be the high, construction grade. But, I think getting to what's most important in terms of driving value for our stakeholders, what's going on in your garden?
How many people do you think forward to the garden tip?
I feel like there is a meaningful constituency that doesn't care about investing content from us and is just like, all right, I want some half-informed, hip shooting, outsider opinions on what to do with gardening.
Yeah. And they like our technical failures. There's a lot of people who tune in just waiting to see how we deal with technical failure.
I know for a fact that a bunch of Invest Vegan clients they're just like, it's really refreshing to hear people talk in English and not be all mission accomplished about about this problem, who knows who our listeners are, I think is the real upshot.
I haven't checked the stats in a while, but it's gotta be massive.
Tens of people. Tens and tens of people. I confess I haven't checked the stats recently either. I am planning to do a little bit of a renovation to the website in October, which I'm pretty excited about. I think
our website is a little bit difficult to navigate.
I think it's what's the technical term for this? Bad? I think it's bad.
I'm glad you said it.
I think
the
it's
way
bad.
that I would describe it is, it seems as if we're trying to put our listeners through a series of IQ tests to get to our content.
Well,
Because
yeah,
even I can't find certain buttons to click from the
I think, yeah,
homepage.
I mean, we demand fealty, first of all. I think the motto here is it's better to be feared than loved. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, like you could
Does
tell that
Ephanon have a motto?
Ephanon does not have a motto. It does not even have a
We're watching.
page.
We're watching. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
motto.
Yeah, exactly. I see you.
I
I
see
see you.
you.
I see you where you are. Um, but yeah, all that's happening. But yeah, like I mean, what do
Okay,
you
garden
it's
tip.
fall's coming, what are you
Yep.
doing? How are you prepping?
I admit that I'm still in this because in the fall is when you do a lot of your planting.
Yep.
And so there's a bunch of seeds I've been planting, tree seeds I've been planting. And this go around with my seeds, I am using a technique called scarification.
Oh, I know. Yeah, you're cutting the seed.
I am. And there's another thing that you do for certain seeds called stratification, which is to chill the seed before you
Yep.
plant it because it needs to feel like it went through winter, I guess.
Mhm.
And so I'm doing this scarification and stratification, and I'm just going to see how does that work. I have all my little. I now don't just go plant them willy nilly in the ground. I have a bunch of little pots where I'll do.
Uh-huh.
Here's my strategy. I do 2 seeds per tree type
Got to
in
get
each little pod. I keep it watered. I keep it actually right by my sink in the kitchen so I can just
Smart.
keep watering it.
Smart.
Good windows there. So I'll keep you posted. I'm hopeful.
It's being able to grow from seed just like makes everything so much cheaper and more fun, I feel, because and you get better plants because they don't have to go through the whole, I mean, never mind the carbon intensity of, shipping a plant from point A to point B. It's not good to be shipped from point A to point B from a health
No.
standpoint. It's no fun and they don't love it.
It also makes your walks around your neighborhood interesting because you're
Mm,
constantly kind of looking around for different seeds that you might take home in your back pocket.
yep, that's a great point. That's a great point.
Also, when you're looking for seeds, you tend to see the dog poo and not step in it. You know what I mean?
So
Whereas if you're not looking for seeds, you might just step in the dog poo. So there's
it's
a
a general
couple.
safety tip.
Yep.
Look
for
and
seeds.
yeah, I mean, the best decisions are justifiable through multiple lenses, right?
Yeah, we were
And,
having a lot of
and I
impact.
think it's interesting you bring up stratification. That's exactly what the locus of activity here is. So Provo has this incredible program where you can get a truckload of compost for $10.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that's like, probably $140 worth of compost at a commercial, yard.
Jeez.
So what we've been doing is basically covering up all of our parking strips with this like free or functionally free compost. And then after the first couple of frosts, I'm going to go out and lay some wildflower seeds over all of it. I've been growing some wildflowers individually and I've like kind of got them seeded and planted and whatever. But in order to create a real wildflower meadow, what you need to do is sow them after the frost so that they can stratify over the winter and then just naturally grow in as their kind of cycle happens. And like
It's beautiful.
an interesting tactical question that anybody who's like thinking about a wildflower meadow will encounter is like, what's the mix between perennials and annuals that you want to include? Because perennial wildflowers will not usually flower in their first year, but they create the lowest maintenance, lowest impact thing long term. So we are overwhelmingly gearing towards perennials. And you can actually buy localized seed mixes of rare native plants, and that's what we're doing.
That's awesome.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Is this
and,
where
like,
your lawn was?
Yeah.
Is that where
So
this is going?
yeah, so this is like the original family farmhouse from
Yeah.
the 1870s. It's like on a corner in a suburban neighborhood, and like it doesn't have much of a yard, but it has these huge parking strips between the sidewalk and the street. And
Yes.
like something like 80% of the overall physical plant is between the sidewalk and the street. So we're just gonna kind of fill that in with beautiful wildflowers.
Beautiful. That's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, and it's been so, yeah, and like there are tons of like 8 and 10-year-old homies in the neighborhood that I'm really excited to like let play with it. And
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, But
Great.
that's it for us. Thank you all so much.
Hell of a show. We love you.
Bye. Love you all.